This podcast is also available via stagelink.com, the groundbreaking new platform for live performing arts. I'm your host, Shanae Stiletto, and my guest on today's Circuspreneur Podcast is Kit Krull. Welcome to the podcast, Kit.
Hello. Yes. Happy to be here.
We are so excited to have you, Kit, and to let listeners know a little bit about you. Kit Krull, he, they pronouns, is an actor, musician, and union representative for Drunk Shakespeare United, DSU, based in Washington, D.C. He's been with the D.C. branch of Drunk Shakespeare since its opening in 2022 and has performed close to 500 shows. Outside of Drunk Shakespeare and DSU, Kit can be found doing music, cosplay, and other generally nerdy things online and around the Baltimore, D.C. area. I love it. Welcome to the podcast, and we love nerdy things here in the circus. We're all about it.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. It's like the combination of all my favorite things right here, right now.
I love it. I'm so excited for this conversation. I'm so excited to speak to you. I'm so excited for Actors Equity connecting us about your brilliant fight to unionize Drunk Shakespeare and how you guys all came together. I mean, this is not an easy fight, but it kind of seems like it came together pretty, I wouldn't say easily for you guys, but not as aggressively difficult as I've seen with some other environments that are very niche art environments, which we are in the circus. And so, Kit, I really want to deep dive into this experience. You are the union representative. I can only imagine what it's been like, again, doing this and coming from, being an actor, being a performer, being an artist like we all are, and then deciding, okay, hey, we want union rights, which are so possible. And, educating all of us on how it is possible and kind of, what that process is like, because the circus arts has still yet to unionize. We have unionization on a very small level throughout the U.S. And in some cities here and there, but more or less, most of the industry is not unionized whatsoever. So this will be again another brilliant kind of lead in into what it could be possible. What the potential could be like for the circus arts industry in terms of unionizing in an environment. And so could you take us first into what is Drunk Shakespeare for folks that are unfamiliar with it? I think it's hilarious. I think it's brilliant. I think it's, I think it's really well done. I really like everything behind it. But please describe that. And then also to how you came to be employed by Drunk Shakespeare as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Drunk Shakespeare is a big old love letter to the Bard, I would say. It is our goal to do Drunk Shakespeare, Shakespeare the way the Bard originally intended. Back in the days, Shakespeare was being performed by a big, essentially, mosh pit of drunk people, and people were jeering, they were like interrupting, they were throwing things, they were having a grand old time watching Shakespeare. And I think through the years, people have kind of assumed it's become more of this very artsy, very kind of highbrow thing that you go to the theater to watch Shakespeare. And I think that Drunk Shakespeare, we bring it back a little bit to that original environment. The concept is one actor takes a certain amount of shots and then attempts to perform a show with four other sober actors trying to keep everything on rails. Usually the drunk actor is very successful in their mission. Things go wild. It is a different show every night because depending on who's playing what role, things will change. Depending on who's drinking, everyone has very different personalities. So it's a very different show depending on who you see, what night it is, what crowd you have. It's a really, really fun show. I personally have been doing it since June of 2022 was when the DC branch of Drunk Shakespeare opened. But Drunk Shakespeare itself has been around for I think 10 years now, I believe. They originally started back in 2014. The New York branch has been open for 10 years. Yeah. There are some people in Drunk Shakespeare United that have done over 1,000 performances at this point. It's something that we all really love. It is such a fun show. Audiences are fabulous. It's really, really good time. Except for when it's not, which is maybe, maybe, hence the Drunk Shakespeare United part of things, but we can get to that later.
So it's a great show. We will definitely get to that part later, because that's the thing where it's like we love our job, right? Like we love our jobs. We love our career. We love artsying. We love, we love these environments that are so off the cuff and kind of exist in these really kind of unique ways where it's not always just completely by the book. However, we're trying to make them a little bit more by the book. I think you realize after a certain amount of time, I love my art, but I also love insurance. I love my art, but I also like to have rights. I love my art, but I love protection in the midst of doing my art. And these environments can get a little bit tricky. It is interesting that it was around for quite some time. This is not like, you guys just sprung up 2 years ago and then all of a sudden you're uniting, you're unionizing. I mean, these are the different sectors of Drunk Shakespeare that are opening up in the recent years. But like you said, Drunk Shakespeare has been around for quite some time. So what was your lead-in? Who got you into Drunk Shakespeare, Kit?
So there are 5 branches of, wait, I'm making sure. Yes, 5 branches of Drunk Shakespeare. New York opened around about 10 years ago. Chicago opened, I believe, back in 2018 or 2019. The DC branch opened post-pandemic in 2022. Phoenix also opened in 2022, and Houston opened start of 2023, I want to say. So I got into Drunk Shakespeare through the general audition that they had back in 2022 when they were getting ready to open. I was one of the original cast members in DC and have been there ever since.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where did it go from, I'm doing my job, I love my job. Could you take us through the daily kind of operations of Drunk Shakespeare and kind of how it started to spiral into, okay, this is an environment that we all love. This is an environment that is now we see not really working very well. It's been working, right? Because our environments work. I mean, people think that just because we're not unionized and just because these environments are very different, obviously the environments work. People pull it together. They get the job done. Most oftentimes it falls on the employees.
I apologize. One moment. I lost. Oh, great.
So back to our conversation. We're picking up where we left off. But, the day-to-day operations of keeping a show going, of keeping a production going. And obviously it's difficult. It's not easy. Even when it's a small cast, sometimes even more things fall on you. Sometimes people see it and they're like, oh, it's not that many people. That should be super easy to run. But it actually ends up being more difficult sometimes because there's not a lot of people to handle everything. And if one person's out, it's very challenging. Maybe you don't have a swing performer. Maybe you do have backups. Maybe you don't. And so it gets very, very tricky. It can't, sometimes it's not very easy to run things in that way. So what kind of started the conversation around Drunk Shakespeare in DC? And then also too, within the other Drunk Shakespeares in the other locations, like, this is something that we kind of need to address. Obviously, when you start out, I've heard that, you start out addressing management and asking for your needs to be met. You start asking, okay, this hasn't changed in a long time. We're super unhappy about this. This is a problem that is quite repetitive. It keeps on coming up. And you see, okay, they're not going to change. And they don't feel like they have to change, right? That's the other thing too, I think we see with employers. They don't feel compelled to make these changes. They'll just let you go. They'll just either let you go or you'll find yourself looking up and it's been 4 years and you haven't gotten a raise. So how did that conversation start?
Yes. So I feel so fortunate. The people that I've worked with at Drunk Shakespeare, the cast, the bar staff, some of our managers, they have been some of the finest people that I have ever worked with. From the beginning, all of us were pretty close. Cast, bar staff, even our original manager at the time, we were all very, very good friends. It was a very small operation. There were originally 9 cast members, handful of people on the bar staff, a bar manager, and a general manager, kind of doing everything. Bar staff would handle all kinds of cleanings, and they would sometimes even they would swing in to do stage management when our general manager would be out of town, because our manager at the time was the only stage manager that we had. There would be actors that would swing in to do stage management. And I think in the beginning, we all just kind of accepted it because honestly, it was so fun to go into work and like see each other. And we had such a good time with the show that I think that we were willing to overlook quite a bit in the beginning. And I think something to note, Brass Jar, the company that owns Drunk Shakespeare, they are a pretty small company, especially when we first started. We had a national director. We had a previous director. He was still kind of on the management team, but he was only kind of working part-time. He originally wrote the script. His name is David Hudson. He's a great person. And then our CEO. Those were the primary 3 people that were running this company. They would work with each company manager in each city, but it was like a team of probably like 5 people when I first started, like 5, maybe like another person or 2 that I was unaware of, but it was definitely a very, very small team. And I think that we just kind of accepted it at first. I've worked for small companies in my life, and you tend to give a little more leeway to smaller, more local places. While Drunk Shakespeare is not that, and especially now, it definitely had more of that, like, we're all friends here, we're a little scrappy, like we're all just kind of like trying to make this thing work. And then I noticed shortly, so a few months after our opening, we started feeling a bit of radio silence from our management as they were opening another branch of the company. And as I said, there's not many of them. They left our managers with not a whole lot of resources to run the show. And we would find ourselves in positions where only 9 cast members, 1 manager to rehearse people. If someone got sick and there wasn't coverage, someone would just kind of swing onto a role that they had never done before with maybe, a few hours of rehearsal beforehand, if we got lucky.
Oh dear.
This started picking up more and more frequently, where very last minute coverage would be needed, very last minute, hey, can you actually work the bar tonight? We had a cast member that for a long time worked as kind of the put in bar manager whenever our bar manager was out, which there wasn't much cross training there. We just mostly got lucky that he was a bartender himself, and kind of these expectations of people just kind of swinging in when needed. It was becoming a little too common and a little too comfortable asking people to do things that were not really their job, essentially. And it kind of all came to a point in March of last year. We had a really terrible COVID outbreak that took out, as I said, there were only roughly 9 of us in the cast, and then maybe like 5 people on bar staff. and then we had one manager. So less than 15 people. 8 people were out sick with COVID, and we had a weekend of completely sold out shows. And there was a night where I think were a total of 6 people working for these sold out shows. 4 people were acting. 1 person was stage managing, even though they had never done that role before. There was one bar staff person that was everyone was just trying to swing in where they could help, and then they hired, I believe, like a Task Rabbit person to also come in and assist. And there were actors running off stage to like press a cue or to like kind of help with the booth, because once again, person that was running the booth had never done that before. People were at the time we had paper menus. We had paper menus that actors were they were taking orders while they were saying lines and like bringing them back to the bar. It was really, and honestly, it went, I think, as well as it possibly could have. But that was so dangerous in theory, because I've done, at this point, I'm 10 shows away from doing 500 shows with this company. And the show is super fun. Love doing it. It is a very, very good time. But unfortunately, with the nature of the show, it is called Drunk Shakespeare. There are people that are going to come to the show really hearing that drunk part. And very enthusiastic about the drunk part. Absolutely. and the story, so many fun stories. Like, mostly the stories that we have are fun, but we have had dangerous audience members in the past, for sure. We have had to escort people out mid-show. We've never had to call, like, we've never had to get like police involvement or anything like that, but definitely there are patrons that we need security for, and we've had to deal with that before. And we got unbelievably lucky that night was not one of those nights that we had overly rowdy patrons, because everything would have just fallen apart. And we all walked away being like, that was the most dangerous thing we've ever done. Like, that was... We were so lucky that they were like sold out happy crowds that were just excited to be there. But if there would have been one person that wanted to cause a problem, like, I don't know what we would have done, actually. And we all walked away from that really being like, something needs to change here. We've too long, we had been kind of doing extra jobs that we did not sign up for, and like, in addition to a lot of like more like scheduling things, pay questions, in addition to a lot of those other things, this was the thing that really shook us up. And we weren't saying the word union, but we were all, at least in the DC company, we were all kind of like, something like that needs to happen. We don't know what the first steps are to take. Something to note, during this time, the different cities were not really talking very much. There was not much of a national contact with each other. We would kind of just hear things through our director, like, oh, New York is doing this, and oh, New York or Chicago saw a video of you guys doing this and they thought it was funny. That was about as much contact as we had. A couple cast members would either maybe know someone through a friend of a friend, but there wasn't much contact between the cities at this time. So we kind of had no idea whether or not this was normal or typical behavior of Drunk Shakespeare. Management definitely kind of led us to believe, like, oh, this never happens to anyone else. Like, that you guys really just got a bad rap this weekend. And we were kind of like,
Sure.
We were like, I don't know. We're starting to
Yeah, it's
maybe
always
not
the
really.
first time that this has ever happened. This is wild. It never happens. The other locations, never, never. You're an anomaly. Yeah,
Yep, that is
yeah.
how for a month we kind of kept being like, "Hey, what do you do when this happens in another city?" And they're like, "Oh, well, it doesn't really happen in another city." Like they would definitely kind of like brush it off. And we were definitely starting to get this kind of like vibe that they didn't want us talking to the other cities. And
Shocker.
yeah,
They don't want you comparing notes. I wouldn't know why. Wouldn't understand
interesting
that.
indeed. But yeah, so at this time we felt very on our own. We didn't really know what to do. And we were like, okay, we're just going to have a meeting with management and kind of tell them how unsupported we felt this weekend and kind of add in some of these other issues that we have been having. Drunk Shakespeare, unfortunately, has a history of not being very consistent with scheduling. One week you might be scheduled for 3 or 4 shows. The next week you might be at 10 shows, and then the following week they'll be like, just kidding, how about one? And we were kind of starting to be like bothered by these inconsistencies, especially as it became more unsustainable when we went from only doing 5 shows a week to 12 shows a week. They like very quickly like built up that number through between like the months of November and March. And while they were ramping up those number of shows, they were not adding any additional support. We didn't have extra stage managers, we didn't have any extra staff. I think we hired one new actor in that time frame, and a lot of us were really starting to feel the weight of just a lack of support from them. And we were like, we need to ask for like more stage managers, more cast members, and additionally for things like that weekend where we were playing manager, bar staff, and trying to perform the show all at the same time. We were like, I feel like that calls for a raise or something, like, or
And were you getting paid when they changed the amount of shows that you were doing per week? Did you get the same pay for one show versus doing 5+ shows? How did they handle that?
so they at the moment they currently pay per performance.
Oh,
So
so it is per
our
performance.
yes, yes,
So
which
your
is
check
work.
changes with the workflow.
Yes, so that's
And
why
how can you
when
live off of that?
mhm, especially when it's
Yes.
so inconsistent, actors would experience that. Maybe one month you'll be scheduled a whole bunch. Maybe one month they'll kind of decide, ooh, maybe we'll take you off for a little bit with and they have a long history of not being super clear as to why they may be taking you off of shows. Not a
Hmm.
lot of great note implementation from them that like helps actors understand like as to why they may be losing shifts. Um, so it all came to a head. We had a meeting with management that it, I think we ended up, yes, we got a stage manager that was separate from our general manager out of it because they were like, yeah, that situation where you guys were also stage managing probably shouldn't happen again. So we got that.
Because you're trying to do your job. You're trying to do your
Yeah.
actual job of acting and performing, but you're also doing these other jobs that are not your job. So, yeah.
Yeah, to the point where in fact we started having as we started doing more shows per week, and especially during this stretch where we had a lot of back-to-back sold out shows, we were starting to have some pretty serious security issues,
Oh,
where there would be belligerent patrons coming in, uh, disrupting the show, to the point we one time had a fight break out, and we were like, how do we deal with this? And they were pretty insistent that there's a track in the show that we have a host. No matter what show we're doing, we always have someone that is emceeing. There is a host. And at the time, they were pretty insistent that the host is a form of security for the show.
I was going to ask, what was the security system like? So now the performers are also tasked to be the security for the show. You can,
Yeah.
okay.
Um, so
Mm.
over the past
Which
year,
is pretty
and
common. Which is
yeah,
pretty common in a lot of theater arts and arts performing spaces and nightlife, which is where a lot of us work. So for listeners listening in, many times there's either zero security to handle this, or it's someone from the staff that has to go around and be security, or it's the performers that have to step in and be security and get the patrons out. So
yeah,
quite
yeah,
dangerous.
definitely. So for at the time, there wasn't a system really at all. There was really very little preventative measure and at all. If someone came in and was belligerent, I think we were instructed to send them water. Uh,
That'll calm them down.
yeah, make them hydrate at least. So
6 drinks in, that'll get them.
yeah, right. And it's like, hydration is important. It's not quite a security measure, but we would first try to kind of like calm them down by sending water, maybe sending food their way. And it was on the actors to kind of watch the audience and make sure that there wasn't a belligerent patron. Occasionally, our bar staff started, especially after a couple incidents, they started paying much closer attention. And our bartenders, on their own volition, would cut people off if they noticed kind of rowdy behavior or like any weird interactions with them. We have, I think, one of the most amazing things about Drunk Shakespeare is how much the cast and crew just have each other's back and are looking out for each other in that way. But yeah, then ultimately it would be either up to the host to tell patrons that they need to leave, even though this is a show that they are also performing in. And if it really got that bad, then we would go to our manager. At the time, I'm very happy to say through our unionization process, and especially through working with the Actors Equity Association, we have been able to implement more security measures through the year to make sure that these crazy incidents were happening far less frequently. I would say our system now is notably better, but we still don't have anything of like a bouncer. It
Wow.
we still
Even
do.
now,
It mostly now comes down to our bar staff and our general manager. Fortunately,
who are not security guards.
correct. That's a little bit of an ongoing fight, but at least the first method
You'll
is
get
not
there.
water anymore.
Yes. And you're on the right path to being able to get there in implementing these union rights. You at least have a structure and a framework that will protect you within having these negotiations and these conversations, which is what makes all of these things so important. Because in our environments with the arts, so many performers and employees are having conversations just like you guys have had.
Yeah.
But again, there's no framework where it will protect you, because you'll all of a sudden just end up off the schedule if you have that conversation too much. You'll all of a sudden be the person that worked once in the week versus the person who gets to work 5 to 12 shows per week, and suddenly see,
Mhm.
your check and your payments dwindle. So, having those conversations, but at least being able to be protected now that you have your union rights, is what makes all the difference, like what you're speaking about. So having those essential, those steps that are headed in the right direction, which is so fantastic. So we're coming down to the very last few minutes, Kit. You have beautifully outlined and, explained your entire journey for Drunk Shakespeare United to get and secure these rights, and then to help us all understand why this was so important and essential. And it just also shows me too, and I think it shows listeners, just how much we put up with in these environments within the arts. It's like, each story I hear, it's like they're all very similar, but they also obviously have nuances that are unique. But the fact that so many of the experiences are so similar, and that, artists like you put up with so much while trying to also do your main job, which is an actor, and trying to make people excited and keep people engaged and do all those things, but also be stressed out about all these roles that are not yours. Those are not your jobs. And the safety breaches that leads to, the quality of life, the quality of performance. I'm sure that your your performances are better now, even because you don't have to be stressed out about all those other things that you're dealing with that are not your responsibility. And it shouldn't be left to these private companies making all these private decisions in-house, where they know that they can just open up a new location, get rid of
Mm-hmm.
everybody else who spoke up too much, and then start over. And so where does the love go? Like, we all loved being here, but you didn't love me as much as I love being here. Probably not, because you got rid of me, because I asked for basic rights, like not having to be a bouncer while I'm trying to do this very difficult Shakespeare performance while I'm drinking. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot. So to lead us out, Kit, for the rest of the podcast in the next like minute or so, could you please just bring it all together of, moving forward, what this means for you guys, moving forward, what it means for Drunk Shakespeare. It's obviously a success story. Not every single, effort to unionize works out like it
Yeah.
has for Drunk Shakespeare United. So you guys are really phenomenal and really amazing, no matter how small or how big the environment is. Again, like we're talking about on a micro and a macro level, the difficulties and the experiences are the same. I've had problems in small shows and I've had problems in big arena tours, and they're all very similar. And they all affect us in our rights to have a career in the exact same way. It makes it either difficult or impossible, or you have to leave the industry, which, is super unfortunate, but that's usually kind of what, folks in our environments come down to. So if you could just kind of put this all, wrap it up in a bow, of what this means moving forward, and what it means to everyone, and what you see the future being like for, you all now involved in Drunk Shakespeare United, in unionizing yourselves.
Yeah. So I completely agree that Drunk Shakespeare, honestly, I think that we have one of the easier unionization processes that I've heard of with a lot of friends in arts and outside of arts. Like, I Drunk Shakespeare, they voluntarily recognized us, which is not common
Wow.
always. That is something that
Yeah.
employers do not have to do by any means, and they voluntarily recognized every single city. The cities all talk now. We are good friends, and
I bet you are.
yeah, so we we are good friends, and we are always updating each other on what is happening, and it's created such a bigger support system and network, and I just a mutual understanding of what the job is, what our resources could be for when things aren't going right. While this has been, I believe, one of the easier unionization processes that I've heard of, even the easier ones are still difficult. We've
Mm-hmm.
definitely been through, as I was saying with that scheduling, we've gone through more union busing tactics where they would take people completely off the schedule, claiming they weren't firing them, but transitioning them to an alumni network when, they were actually firing them. Just kind of wanted to use a different word for it. I, but, but
Terrible.
yeah,
How
it's
awful.
it's a little wild. But I think that something, especially in a smaller with a smaller company like Drunk Shakespeare, they have expanded over the past year, and I think it's because the union has kept the fire under their feet, recognizing that they need to expand their operations to have these cities function in the way that they want them to function. It feels a little symbiotic. I think that the union has actually really, really helped Drunk Shakespeare learn to run their business. We often say in the union that us us as people who are working there on a day-to-day basis, we know how the company works probably better than management does, because we're there every day.
Mm-hmm.
We are witnessing everything that is happening every single day. And I think that this has been a story of Drunk Shakespeare realizing that of its employees and putting more trust into us over the past year through bargaining, through rough conversations, through rough periods where I not all of the greatest things were happening when they were not necessarily acting the best. However, I definitely think that they are learning, and the union has been the best thing for making this a safer workspace. Things are so much safer. we don't have our guarantees yet because we have not finished contract negotiations, but I'm really excited to say that we are very, very close to having a contract. I definitely likely to happen before the end of this year, maybe even much sooner than that. So
Oh,
I definitely say, if your fellow actors and your fellow performers are going, and your staff, the other very amazing thing about Drunk Shakespeare is that our entire staff is in the union, both our bar staff as well as the performers as well as the stage managers. But your fellow staff is going to have your back more than management, and relying on each other and trusting each other and unionizing is the best way, or at least in my experience, the best way to get what you want. There is strength in numbers instead of individually going to management and individually having problems. It's much more likely that you will all have similar stories.
wow. I'm so, so, so happy for all of you. You guys are so amazing and phenomenal, and looking forward to that contract and all of those things being confirmed before the end of the year. That is so amazing. You are all such an inspiration to my audience and to all of the niche environments and the performing arts and art spaces. And I'm just so grateful that the art space is finally standing up for itself, and we have great support like Actors Equity and so many other environments that are supporting our journeys, because like you said, it's not easy, but it is worth it. So, audience, it's follow Kit, follow Drunk Shakespeare United, and follow their journey so that you can continue to learn and reach out and get support and get help. If you're still confused or you really don't understand what the steps need to be taken for your own personal environment to unionize and to come together, then ask. I know that they're more than willing to assist, to share, and to support. So to close out this podcast, this Circuspreneur Podcast is also available on stagelink.com, stagelync.com, the groundbreaking new platform for live performing arts that provides unmatched access and connection to this vibrant world of shows and entertainment. If you are a professional in the performing arts, visit stagelink.com/pro, stagelync.pro. StageLink Pro offers industry professionals higher visibility, networking opportunities, and tools to support and enhance their careers. Until next time, everyone, I'm your host, Janae Stiletto. Please stay safe and unionize.